Okay. Does it like adjust it when you go on Instagram? Like StreamYard?
I thought so. I mean, we're technically live now. Let me make sure that my key is updated. Let's see here. Does it have, did you click go live on Instagram and did it work, or what's?
I think so. I think it's working. It's just
okay.
The formatting, but no big deal.
Okay. All right. Well, if it doesn't, for whatever reason, go live for me. Oh, so it says I'm live. Okay, cool. All right, cool.
Let's go with it.
Sorry, everybody, for having to listen to that. This is our first time using StreamYard. So technology, we gotta love it. But hello, everybody. I am Kara Francis. I am a marriage and divorce coach. Used to work full-time as a divorce lawyer, pivoted to coaching over 2.5 years ago, started my own business. Currently live in Manhattan, but I coach clients nationwide. And I have here with me today, Victoria. Victoria, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Victoria Kurloff. I am a certified divorce financial analyst, a family financial mediator, and the founder of Divorce Analytics. Really, my job is to help you understand the financial components of your divorce, because this is going to be the biggest financial uncoupling or financial event, rather, of your life. And if you're not aware of how your money is going to be impacted, you're definitely going to make decisions that are out of alignment with what your bigger financial needs and goals are.
I love how you bring up alignment, because that is something that I help my clients do as well. From a holistic perspective, right? Of course, finances are in that, but just from an overall perspective of reconnecting to yourself and getting clear on what's important to you, what are your values, and what do you want your life to look like? And once we get clear on that, how do we get there? And so whether you are pre-marriage, married, or ready to move forward with divorce, both Victoria and I can be very instrumental and supportive in that process of really setting yourself up for success. And so today in particular, we are going to talk about spousal support. So what is it? How does it impact my divorce? And I think this is helpful information, particularly for people who are maybe considering divorce, but then as soon as they think about moving forward, you get the mind swirl, the tornado of everything that is unknown about the process and what's the future going to look like, including my financial situation, like something as simple as going to the grocery store. What's that going to look like? And those fears have a lot of power. And so if you're operating from that fear mindset, that can really influence the decisions you make or don't make, which in this case would be staying in an unhealthy or unhappy marriage. But like I said, this can really be beneficial for everybody, right? Whether you're about to get married, or even in the divorce process. So Victoria, what would be helpful maybe for the audience is for you to explain what spousal support, like how that fits into how you serve your clients.
Absolutely. So to begin with, this is not financial advice. Our discussion is for general education purposes. If you do have specific questions you need answered, make sure you contact your attorney, your CPA, your financial professional. This information, we're just trying to help you. Don't make your legal strategy off of this. But with that said, spousal support is really one of the most contentious topics. And it's generally because families do not have good financial conversations when they get married. We just kind of fall into a pattern of what works, and then things start to not work. And we don't have those courageous conversations because they honestly are really hard to have. And all of us have unresolved childhood trauma that surrounds our relationship with money. And oh, guess what? You have to deal with that on top of your divorce. And so most of us are experiencing money wounds that are stemming from unworthiness, abandonment, and vulnerability. And when you are going through a divorce, these experiences are heightened, and you really need to help yourself understand mathematically what your cost of living is. So with spousal support, now it's going to vary based off of what state you're in. I do a lot of practicing. I think I've practiced in 21 states at this point. But depending on your state, there's going to be different caveats surrounding that. But really, what it boils down to is, the length of the marriage, right? That's going to play a really big role in if you're going to be awarded support. Your income disparity, your earning potential, the recipient's ability to pay. And when you're doing this assessment, there's a lot of different things that you have to uncover. But the most important thing is really how much your lifestyle is costing.
Yes, I think that's critical, because no matter what your law says or what you might be entitled to, at the end of the day, it comes back to what is my cost of living? And based upon the legal ramifications of this divorce, am I going to be able to maintain that? Or what sort of strategy do I need to adopt to try to maintain that? Or do I need to maybe do some personal reflection about my cost of living in general, and what it looks and feels like, and whether there's any room to make some shifts? So yes, echoing what Victoria said, again, even though I am a lawyer, everything I share is not legal advice. As Victoria mentioned, this is very much not only a state specific issue, but a case specific issue. So family law is so fact specific, and no one case is like the next one or identical to any other one. So again, specific legal advice or questions, you want to speak with an attorney who is licensed in your state. I'm licensed in Illinois and New York. All of that said, right, from the legal side, there are really 3 steps for purposes of spousal support. First things first is to determine each party's income. And if you are in a marriage where one of you is the primary financial provider and the other is the primary stay-at-home parent, you may have different levels of accessibility to this information. So this first step is really about gathering information about each other's income. And usually a tax return is going to be a great place to start, but then you would also want to get into pay stubs or earnings statements, because those have more detail, especially when it comes to things like deferred comp and other kinds of benefits.
If there's business owners involved, that becomes even more complicated, because there's something called a perquisite. And these nice little perks, right? They're non-cash compensation, and that actually needs to be added back to your total income. So what this looks like in real life is, your cell phone bill. For me, I'm an entrepreneur, so my cell phone bill is paid by my business. So is my car insurance. So these are nice perks. But then if I was going through a divorce, this would need to be added to my total income. And so if you are a W-2 employee, that's going to be really straightforward. But if you are an entrepreneur, if you're married to an entrepreneur, if you have multiple businesses, if you're an executive, compensation is not linear. And so you really need to drill down and work with a divorce financial analyst to understand what your total income is.
100%. Yes. The complexity of determining income goes from, like you said, W-2 wage earner to a business owner or somebody who has passive business interests that maybe kick off income, determining, right? There's also the issue of cash flow versus taxable income. And so there's a lot of nuances there that we won't do a deep dive into. But I guess the takeaway from this first step is getting as much information as possible about what each of you have, any and all sources of income, not just from your job, but from investments, and anything beyond that. And until you feel like super comfortable or you're on the same page about each of your respective incomes are, it's hard to make forward progress from there unless you decide to have a needs-based support award. But that's really the first pivotal step. And that in and of itself can be very contentious.
It certainly can be. And so I think when you're talking about income available for support, it's also important to talk about imputing income. And I know that's one of the calculations that go into one of my spousal support needs. But you really have to understand. So we have the financially compensated spouse. We understand exactly what they're making. But then when it comes to valuing the non-financially compensated spouse in the relationship, there is a process to go through. And that, depending on the legal process model that you're going through, it can either be very formalized, where you have a vocational coach actually come in to determine what your earning capacity would be. Or it could be as simple as determining, what your last job paid you and kind of going with that, and then beginning the income imputation process there.
Mm-hmm. So. Yes. And this is why this issue is so fact specific, right? Because you could have somebody who got married at 20 and hasn't worked since they were 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so imputing any sort of income to that sort of individual versus somebody who maybe got married at 35, stopped working so that they could have kids, and now she's 40 and now they're getting divorced, right? Those are two very different fact scenarios. And that's why too, when a lot of my clients ask me, should I go back to work while this case is pending, or should I wait until it's over? And of course, the answer is always, it depends. But just like from a high level, whether you go back to work now or go back to work after the divorce will likely have some sort of impact on your spousal support. So it's either, if you don't work now, we might impute income to you anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or if you even have zero imputed income, but then you get a job after the divorce, assuming you guys don't have non-modifiable support, which is pretty rare, it's usually always modifiable, right? And so regardless, it's going to impact the amount of support you receive, most likely.
And I think another important thing to note is that depending on your state, marriages, like in California, where I do a lot of work, marriages over 10 years, well, that's considered long-term, and there is a totally different set of circumstances and laws that dictate long-term spousal support as opposed to short-term marriages under like those 10 years. And so for long-term spousal support, if you have been married over those 10 years, the court will always retain jurisdiction over that spousal support amount. And so even currently, if you end up with no support, but then let's say something major happens, let's say, I don't know, maybe you lose your job or some health event happens and your spouse gets it rich, well, your ex-spouse, that you might have the grounds to take them back to court to see if you can get an adjustment. So keep in mind, the length of marriage is really important. And most courts these days really focus on rehabilitative support. Do you want to explain what that means, Kara?
Yes. So this varies from state to state, of course, but really this comes into play when we're determining the amount and duration of spousal support. So in certain states, if your income, either your individual income or your combined gross income with your spouse, is at a certain threshold or below, then there are formulas and guidelines that apply, and they're pretty strictly applied unless there's some sort of really good reason that they shouldn't be applied. And so the goal and purpose of that is really to help more cases settle so that we're not having all of these court battles about support, right? And so where reasonableness comes into play a little bit more, in my experience, is if your income is above that threshold in a very high net worth case. And then it becomes more so, well, what are your actual needs, right? So like if we extrapolate the formulas beyond the threshold, you would be entitled to receive X. But what if your monthly expenses are what if that's 3 times your monthly expenses, right? And so that's when we get into the question of reasonableness.
And that's where New York State's a lot different than California. But really what it comes down to when you're dealing with high net worth cases is really demonstrating what the marital standard of living is. And so we haven't gone into that concept yet, but essentially what it is determining the average monthly burn rate over a 1, 3, or 5 year period to really average out those lifestyle costs. And that essentially becomes your top line figure in a spousal support analysis. Then from there, you project forward your post-divorce cost of living. As Kara mentioned, it has to be reasonable and in line with the general notion that this is a divorce. You're not going to get rich off of it. There's going to be a change in lifestyle, just straight up. And if you're in that high net worth situation, that change of lifestyle might look something different than it's going to if you are, a middle income earner. And so you need to show the court through an evidence-based report really what this looks like to you, because this is a highly emotional topic. And look at all of these different caveats that we've gone over in the last 10 minutes, and we haven't even gone into specific cases. So the more that you have the mathematical analysis that shows what your marital standard of living is, then projecting forward your post-divorce cost, right? So your housing situation is going to change. Your health insurance, that's a big thing, especially if you are doing a gray divorce, which is part retirement plan, part divorce plan. And so with health insurance changes, if you are getting your insurance from your spouse, you're eligible up to stay on their plan for up to 36 months post-divorce. But unfortunately, they can charge you up to 140% of the premium. And generally, the premium is being partially paid by your spouse's their employer. So now you have this huge monthly cost to stay on their health insurance. So you have to look at the healthcare exchange by the government, or if you have that option through your employer. But this is something that a lot of people really, gives them a lot of worry, and especially if you do have some health concerns.
100%. Health insurance is huge. And I really like how you make the distinction between, okay, what's our historical lifestyle and what is my projected post-divorce lifestyle? Those are two very different things. You're going from one household with maybe 1 to 2 incomes to 2 separate households on maybe only 1 income, at least to begin. And so there is going to be some change, and it can be very emotional. And that's why it's so important to be realistic about what your goals and expectations are, because of course we all want the moon and stars, but that's not how the law works. It's not how divorce works. And so it's really important that if there are fears there or anxieties around this, to really dig through those and process those, because this is happening regardless of whether you like it or not. And it's interesting. I mean, I feel like sometimes, in a situation where maybe, again, one spouse is the primary earner, the other spouse takes care of the children in the home and just has a credit card that he or she uses for all of their expenses on a daily basis, and it gets paid. They don't pay it, but it gets paid. And so it's a huge, huge adjustment to realize I am responsible for these expenses now. And I got to figure out what I actually need each month, because I never really had to think about it much before.
Absolutely. And this is generally where a lot of the disagreements happen in spousal support conversations, because generally one spouse has been held outside of the financial decision-making process and the bill paying, and they have no idea what their lifestyle actually costs. And so I have a budget blueprint tool on my website that will help you go through each step. It's literally a 12-step guide to help you gather the data. It's the same template I use when I build out my global settlement proposal analyses, but you really have to start there. And it's generally the most terrifying part. All of us grow up in, America for the most part with a capitalistic and consumptive society. And what we're taught is to regulate our emotions through finances. And there's a reason why most Americans don't have, $1,000 in our bank account. Well, that's because we've been promoted to, buy. And when I was married to Voldemort, it was pretty miserable. And I had a closet full of black bags. It was literally the same black bag, just slightly different. And I realized one day, I walked in here, I'm it's like a mausoleum to black purses. It's like my heart. So, that was a little bit of an awakening for me. And I have worked with a lot of women that they have these wonderful material goods, right? They have the Louis bags, they have the huge rings. But when you actually ask, what was that? Like, how did you get that? You find out that was, her husband trying to buy her silence. Was running an affair, and one of my best friends has this massive 10-carat rock, and it was, oops, I guess my dick fell into someone else. I'm so sorry about that. Here's this gift. And when you are in that way of living, it can feel it's hard to get out of, because your brain has been hijacked and your dopamine center is being, really, they're maximizing their leverage by using the material goods to hijack your brain system, instead of realizing, oh, this guy's cheating on me. There's a whole host of other issues. The conversation is hijacked. And so you have to be mindful of how your communication with your spouse has been throughout the marriage, because 100% it is going to dictate your divorce conversations and your negotiation. And I think that's what a lot of people forget, that divorce is really a presentation on what you want. And if you don't have the math to back up your presentation, the other side is not going to give you what you propose.
Right.
So,
really good points raised there, in that, like you said, sometimes there are gifts for prior bad behavior. And so, how does that fit into your post-divorce lifestyle, right? And that is so wrapped up in emotion, because like you said, the reasons you received the gifts may be very heavy. And another thing that I think it's important to realize, and this is something my clients, I feel like, experience often, which is they make the decision to get divorced, and then during the divorce, their soon-to-be ex shows up in a way that is very frustrating or anxiety-inducing for them. And I'll ask questions around, like, how was he, like, he or she during the marriage? Like, how did you guys communicate about these issues in the past? And my client will bring up similar behaviors or ways of acting by their spouse. And I have to remind clients that just because you've now decided to end this relationship doesn't mean your spouse is a different person now. They're going to show up the same way in your divorce that they did in your marriage, perhaps even worse. And so, again, coming back to being realistic about your expectations and goals, be realistic about who's on the other side of that negotiating table, and focus on what's within your control, which is getting really clear on your cost of living and your income, and gathering that information. And like Victoria said, presenting your best argument that you can. And another thing you brought up that resonated with me was this initial financial analysis that you help your clients do, that it can feel overwhelming and scary. Similarly, most states do have a requirement to complete and submit some sort of financial affidavit form or a financial disclosure statement, or I think New York, it's a net worth statement, but they all kind of boil down to the same topics, which is list out all of your income, taxes, deductions, expenses, and assets and debts. And the expenses section can be very, very time consuming, because you don't realize how many different things you buy or have to pay for on a regular basis. And so sometimes parties can get overwhelmed and just be like, oh, whatever, I'm just going to estimate all of these things because this is just like so much work. I just want to move forward. This is probably the most important document in your case. And it's right at the beginning because it sets the stage. It's referred to all of the time throughout the case. The judge relies upon them very heavily in making decisions. And so if you have to keep amending them to correct mistakes, right, that kind of takes away some of the credibility of your financial affidavit.
And it's very expensive. It
Yes,
is very, very, very expensive.
yes. And so put in the time and effort up front. I promise you, and I'm sure Victoria will echo this, it is worth your time. It is a good investment in your future to take your time with this. Don't rush it. Do a little bit at a time. If it starts to get overwhelming, take a break, and invest in someone like Victoria who can really help you streamline this process and be more efficient about it.
That was really well put, Kara. And I think you just have to reiterate the fact that do not estimate your budget. I mean, I always can tell when the opposing counsel has estimated their budget, and it makes me laugh because I'm like, great, you just have so much more income available for support now. You know, I guarantee you spend more than $100 a month on entertainment when your income's, $20,000 a month. I can tell based off of all of the cases I've done really where your expenses should be. And when the opposing party is kind of shortchanging themselves, that makes me, kind of smile, because then I'm able to really highlight how much more income they have. And so don't put yourself in that position. You need to have documented facts, just like your assets and debts schedule. You have to put the data valuation and provide the financial statement that accompanies that asset. You don't have to do that for your budget, but you should. In fact, for every one of my spousal support analysis, I have either the client or I crunch 1 to 5 years of financial data, because you need to capture those once a year things. Especially if you guys have a house or a condo or an apartment, right? You have like monthly maintenance and all sorts of different costs that you need to really understand, because you only have one chance to do this right. There is so much onus put on the financial disclosure process, but because it is overwhelming, it's very easy to shortchange yourself, and your future self will feel it. So take a step back. And a lot of this can be done with like automated software systems like Monarch Money or like Tiller from Google. It kind of helps you aggregate all of your financial accounts. And so it's not as big of an overwhelming event if you just get with the right professional. And that's really where I like working with a divorce coach like Kara, right? Because there's so many emotions that go into this process, but especially spousal support, because not only are you having to recalculate your whole style of living, you're now having to potentially, re-examine your career path and realize how that's going to play a factor in your spousal support, especially if you have not been working outside of the home. And if you get analysis paralysis, it is going to cost you. That's Kara said earlier. The divorce is happening whether you want it to or not. And you need to show up as prepared as possible so you can really create the proposal to set your future self up for success.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. It's, look, divorce can be, I never sugarcoat it. It's challenging. It's a difficult experience, but it doesn't have to take complete control over your life. Like, wherever you possibly can, take the control back. And if you're still having trouble executing on the things that are within your control, let's address what's going on internally. What mindset are you operating under? What feelings are you experiencing that is causing you to not show up for yourself? Because in addition to, like you said, Victoria, figuring out maybe reevaluating your career path, you've got potentially being a co-parent for the first time. You've got dealing with family and friends who may feel a certain way about this divorce. You've got your own personal identity issues and challenges and feelings about it, depending on which side you're on in this relationship. And so there is so much happening, and it is not realistic or fair to expect you to handle this all by yourself. And that's why I firmly believe, and I believe Victoria's on the same page, it's really important to build your team, because each of us address different aspects of your life. And so as someone who used to work full-time at a law firm, it is not efficient, it is not cheap, and it is not going to get you the results you want if you push everything into the lawyer basket and expect your lawyer to solve all of these questions and problems for you. I know from experience that doesn't work. And it is important to really diversify your portfolio, so to speak, so that you can really show up as your best self holistically.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to note that your attorney does not have personal finance training, nor are they trained in communication strategies to help you be a better, co-parent with your ex, or the emotional regulation support that you really need. Divorce is truly a 4-phase event. There's an emotional and social side that is handled by your divorce coach and your therapist. But when it comes to the financial and the legal side, you need to be building that out separately. And the financial phase is best handled by a certified divorce financial analyst. And then when you get everything in alignment, you get your attorney on board. And depending on what process model you pick, we didn't go into that really in this call, but there's a variety of options from mediation to collaborative to litigation. And, how you are able to show up with your ex is going to be how you can really pick the right process model to collaborate and communicate with. And really, no matter what, though, you're going to have the same base financial documents and a proposal, because your attorney, your mediator, whoever you're working with is not going to provide that for you. This is not fair. This is, especially if you are the one that is requesting financial support, it is on you to develop exactly how much money you need to have a successful post-divorce life, and then back it up with financial facts. And honestly, I gotta say, I do a lot of high conflict mediations and just amicable mediations, and the payor is always willing to pay as long as he understands where the money is going, or they understand where the money is going. Right. But generally, there's like the stupid notion that all of the money is going on hair and nails and makeup. And
yeah,
and you really
have your new partner.
Oh my gosh. My favorite is she got new clothes, she's seeing someone else. Or maybe everything was threadbare, because that's how it goes sometimes. You take care of everybody but yourself. Mm-hmm. So, the point is, you know who your spouse is. And if you keep that in mind, you can work with your coach to really craft the right communication and the presentation strategy. So you don't have to engage an attorney that's going to, big firms are fantastic because they have support, but they also have a very laid out process model. And it's going to even if you and your spouse can agree to things, well, you are on that track and they are going to take you through that system. And it might not be beneficial to you. It could probably actually cost you a lot more money. And if you have the ability through documented financial, evidence to work with your partner to kind of de-escalate things, you can go with mediation and really save yourself a lot. It's not just the ability to communicate, but it's also having a flexible process structure that enables you to uncouple in the way that your family needs, that doesn't add on cost just because you have to go through this firm's legal process.
Yes. That's another example of one of the things that you can take control over. Obviously, your spouse has to be on board as well, right? But how you want to get divorced, right? And like you said, there are various avenues to get there. And how you communicate with your spouse about your support needs. I find that providing as much objective, factual based evidence works best, right? Because this is somebody who might not trust you anymore or not trust you completely. So you got to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, be able to back it up. And it doesn't have to be like what you see on TV or in the movies where we're in a courtroom and the wife is on the stand and she's just taking it from husband's attorney. And doesn't have to be War of the Roses, right? Divorce and how we get divorced and creativity and solutions available these days is so much greater. So take advantage of it. But like Victoria said, if you're the type to get analysis paralysis, that's where bringing in professionals can help you kind of take a step back and see more clearly what your options are and how you want to get there. And how I always explain this in more detail to my clients, the value of having different professionals is, for example, as a coach, I help you get really clear on your goals and what your options are based upon the circumstances or the reality that you live in. You then see Victoria, right? Okay, these are my goals. You know, what do the facts say? What do the numbers say about this, right? That might lead to more of a refinement of the goals with me. And then once they have a clear understanding of what they want and what the documents say, go to your lawyer. What are my options under the law in light of all of this? What paths can we potentially go down? What's the strategy here, right? And so you can see how it all kind of, everybody kind of does their part. Everybody ideally stays in their lane, and it really produces a beautiful, empowering result for you.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to understand, you need to dictate the quality of divorce experience you want. Because if you take a reactive position and you are letting the other person dictate everything, it's going to be miserable, and you're going to be in your parasympathetic nervous system thinking that a tiger is going to come out of the bushes and maul you to death, because that's how our body operates, you know. So you have to be very mindful with building out your team, breaking it down into each phase, and partnering with the right professional. And I gotta say, my clients that have a divorce coach have a much better experience than those who don't. You know, attorneys, they speak their own language, and it's very overwhelming because they communicate in their own way. They speak their own language. They have their own way of doing business. And for us lay people, it doesn't make sense. But your divorce coach is going to have a lot of experience, like Kara, right? She was an attorney, and so she understands the best of both worlds, right? And the legal model is needed, but there's a lot that you can do outside of that. And by working with the right professional at the right time, you actually lower the total cost of your divorce. You know, if you do ask your attorney to help you with the financial disclosure documents, they're not going to tell you no, but they're going to send you to their paralegal, who their training is filling out legal forms, not in financial analysis. And, you know, that's a very big difference. So one of the big questions also is, how can I afford to keep the house? Well, that's a 100% a financial question. You need to sit with a mortgage broker. You need to determine if your loan's assumable. There's so many things that you need to understand before you ask your attorney to fight for that house or that asset. If you don't do that, what ends up happening is you'll spend 50, 100, however much money fighting for an asset that is going to put you in a horrible financial situation post-divorce. And so Kara mentioned it earlier. You need to have goals. If you do not have divorce goals, you are going to experience something called decision fatigue. And this occurs when you literally, your brain gets so tired of making all of these freaking decisions, it just throws in the towel. And I'm sure you have experienced it, right? Like when we've been studying for finals and you're just like, oh, you know, just let me be done. I don't care if I get an F. I just want to be done. And this is like not the attitude to have when you're going through the biggest financial transition of your life. Like 100%, it's going to hurt you post-divorce. So get with Kara, understand your goals, and then when you get decision fatigue, you won't actually go for it because you know that that decision is out of alignment with your bigger ideas. And you understand also the financial implications of selecting the wrong proposal. Or, you know, oftentimes, like somebody will just offer like $5,000 or $10,000 a month in spousal support. And hey, it looks like it'll probably cover the bills, but unless you actually know, you should never accept that proposal because it is very hard then to go back and re-adjudicate that. So,
yeah, 100%. I always say you only get one crack at this divorce, right? This divorce, you get one shot, subject to the fact that, you know, spousal support and child support might be modifiable in the future, but like this is where you set yourself up for success as much as you can. And so setting those realistic goals about your cost of living and how much spousal support you would like, and then fact checking them with Victoria of like, okay, are these goals actually realistic, or like where are we at? And I mean, I have to say, if I could take myself back to law firm life, if I had a client show up and be like, I worked with my coach, these are my goals. I worked with a certified divorce financial analysis. Here's all of the backup showing like what my cost of living is and what our incomes are, etc. now what do we do? I would have been like, you just saved me so much time and headache trying to like pull this information out of you document by document. And so it really does work when you approach it from that strategic perspective. And I also just need to echo, I had so many cases as a lawyer settle due to reports prepared by people like Victoria. Because again,
Yeah.
opposing party rarely trusts what their spouse or their spouse's attorney says, right? It's always that level of paranoia of they're just trying to screw me over. I don't trust them. And then you bring in a report from a neutral professional based upon document and evidence and facts, and the numbers don't lie, right? And so I've had so many clients where they wanted the case to be over so badly, but they couldn't. They felt so scared that the proposal that they were accepting somehow was going to kick them in the butt. There was something. It was too good to be true, or something along those lines. And then bringing them a report showing them the numbers and how everything plays out over the years was like the game changer. So it just goes to show you how much value different professionals can bring to your case, specifically with the issue of spousal support, which we've been talking about today. So I just wanted to like back up high level because I know we have to wrap up here in a few minutes, but high level, again, spousal support from a legal perspective, determine each of your incomes, determine whether either of you is entitled to receive spousal support, which is a legal issue, and then determine your cost of living, which is a fact-based issue, and then determine the amount and duration of your spousal support, what you would request. Again, that is a legal issue. So you can see how goals and facts and finances and legalities are all very much interwoven here. But those from a very high level are the basic steps. But yeah, Victoria, any final thoughts or words or insights as someone who's seen this from all angles?
Well, I would just encourage everybody to lean into the process. It is overwhelming. There's no two ways about it. It's going to be very emotional, but the more that you actually outsource the task to the right professional, you can really set your future self up to be in that place of empowerment and to make data-driven decisions so you don't end up with a divorce settlement that has a hidden bomb in it. Taking a step back, getting a divorce coach, a certified divorce financial analyst, and your attorney to all work together is really going to be the best way for you to truly maximize spousal support.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And the word that stood out to me the most was empowered. All about helping our clients make empowering decisions. We're not letting the divorce happen to us. We are making decisions to set us up for our future success that feel aligned with who we are and what we really want. So I just want to thank you all for stopping by. We will, I believe, have the replay available as well. So not to worry if you weren't able to catch this live. And I just really want to say thank you to Victoria for sharing the space for me. And I think we have at least one more of these under our belt. Who knows how many we have, but we'll be back again.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, guys.